Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. I'm really looking forward to sharing my conversation today with Shannon Horgan, who is an interior designer based in Southern California. I came across Shannon through Design and Grow and really love her beautiful, beautiful work. I really encourage you to, after you've listened to our conversation, go check out her website and her Instagram feed. It's got loads of beautiful garden and landscape design inspiration. And I wanted to get her onto the podcast because I think it's really interesting that she has pivoted from initially doing home staging and then interior design to landscape design. And the reasons behind that decision, what she has learned on her journey, and she also shares a little bit of the back end of her business. And she is really a highly organized and thorough person. So I thought, okay, this is a great person to have on the podcast. And also she shares her tips towards the end on, how you can create a thriving garden as well. So please enjoy my conversation with Shannon Horgan. Hi, Shannon. I'm so looking forward to talking to you about all things landscape design, but I like to start at the beginning because that is not where you started. And even just to go a little bit further back than that, can you please share your story in terms of where you grew up, were you creative as a child, and I guess transitioning from that world of high school to thinking about what you're going to do once you leave?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. This is such an honor and so exciting. My childhood, I grew up in a small town here in Southern California and was fortunate enough to have very easy and abundant access to the outdoors, which I think lent to a lot of creative exploration. And, there were hiking trails really close by and orchards that we would run around. And my sister and I would go climb up boulders and dry creek beds. And my education definitely had an emphasis on creativity and problem solving and all of that as well. So I think all of that definitely played a part. Also, my dad, looking back, he was very creative and he also loved landscape design, and he would do sketches of my parents' property and had a dream of doing like an English garden style landscape. So I think that, looking back, all of that sort of foreshadowed into like what I'm doing now. But when I went to college, I did a degree in sociology, and I had a lot of emphasis on environmental classes. I did natural resource management. So there was that thread that ran through, and then also the thread of people. And actually my first year in school, I was in the business school. So there also that came into play as well. And it's funny because all of those things are now wrapped into what I do in one. So that was my college education. And after college, I wanted to travel. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I went and I traveled around Southeast Asia for a few months. And then I ended up going and doing a year-long work and holiday visa in Australia, actually. And the first 6 months that I was in Australia, I au paired for a family. And the mom of the kids that I au paired happened to have like a really incredible Scandinavian homewares brand. And when I first came, not only was I au pairing, but it was rolling into the holidays and she needed some back end like assistance and help on, inventory and things like that. And so I ended up getting a little bit of exposure to that, which was something that like a field interiors and homewares and all that I never thought I would be exposed to, but I ended up loving it. And so that was a very cool experience. And the second half of the year I was in Australia, I worked on a farm for part of that time, which was always the plan. And I like had always loved that and been interested in that. And I worked actually in Byron Bay on a farm. At the time, I think it was called Lighthouse Organics, and now it's called Conscious Ground Organics. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I did some of that work for a few months. And yeah, so fast forward, I came back to California and I moved back to my hometown for a few months. And I actually worked on a citrus orchard there as well before moving to Los Angeles. And when I got to Los Angeles, it was 2018. And again, I was still searching for like what I wanted to do. And there was so many different things I was interested in, wellness, ecology and outdoors. And I also loved the design aspect of what I had been exposed to. So I ended up actually assisting a woman for a few years who was an interior designer and also was mostly doing staging design. And so we would go all around Los Angeles and we would furnish these homes, mostly new construction, and a lot of spec homes. But that was so cool. And I got to meet a lot of developers and a lot of real estate agents through that and make a lot of connections in this industry. And that eventually segued into me taking my own staging jobs and eventually into taking my own interior design jobs and clients through those connections that I had made with the developers and real estate agents. And yeah, all the while, so that was mostly interior projects as it started. That just was what people mostly needed. But I was doing some spec homes. And so for those homes, I was able to do both the landscape design and the interior design. But at the time, I didn't have very much experience with landscape design, although I was very interested in it. And so in the background, I was taking a few classes at UCLA for landscape design. And as I continued to build up my education with that and my exposure to that, I really fell in love with that. And so about a year and a half ago, that's how I transitioned into just doing the landscape design, focusing only on that and no longer doing interior design, even though I did love that. And I love the creativity behind that. But I really love, again, like where ecology marries design, marries wellness. And I feel like I found that sweet spot.
Amazing. Okay, I have to ask you, what was the name of the homewares brand in Australia, the Scandinavian one?
It's called Design Stuff. Do you know the brand?
Oh, yeah, I know that one. Yeah. I'm sure many of the listeners do. So it's just so funny that I didn't realize we had so many connections, that you had stayed in Byron Bay, and that, I'm very familiar with that brand as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, the world is very small. It's so much smaller than we ever realize.
Yes. No, she's amazing. And that whole chapter, that whole year I spent there was incredible. I love Australia and I loved all of the experiences that I had there.
Okay, all right. So there's a few things I want to ask you about, just even before we start exploring landscape design in more detail, because I think that it's really interesting that a lot of the opportunities that came your way were through like you say, you were doing something in an unrelated field, you were being an au pair, and then you started getting work in this, with design stuff, this particular homewares brand. And similarly, when you then went back home, you were assisting somebody else and getting lots of exposure and connections that way as well. And so often on our journeys, it's often not, what we know, but it's who we know. And it's putting ourselves in the right rooms, in the right spaces, so that we can really get an insider view on how things work. Because when you're on the outside, it can be really challenging to sort of know, it's like, how does this actually work? So I think that is, a great move in many ways on your part to kind of get those things, and it might not have even necessarily been as conscious as that. But what would you say were some of the big lessons that you learned, or the big moments of like, oh, okay, this is how this works, when you started to do, say, home staging? Because I know many listeners are interested in that. So I think it'd just be good to get a little bit of your perspective of somebody who was doing that quite a bit within the sort of the Californian experience. I mean, I've shared a lot about, my experience within Australia of doing less home staging, but more styling. Can you just share a little bit about that part of your journey first?
Like how I got into the staging or just the connections?
Well, just when you started to, I guess, first of all, how you got into it, just you can touch on that. But then also, once you got into there, what were some of the moments of realization in terms of, oh, okay, so this is actually what it involves? And what was your kind of, I guess, day to day like in relation to that? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I think just being thrown into it right away, it was very hands-on. I loved that every single day was different. Like, I mean, a lot of the times we would do one house in, let's say it was anywhere between 1 to 5 days, depending on how big the home was. But on each project, it demanded like different. I mean, each project you had to be organized for one. Um, for two, like the needs were different. Some of the homes were brand new construction, and some of them weren't. And so, like, I think just staying adaptable and staying curious and like ask. I was brand new to this, so I think just asking people how they got to where they are, meeting these developers, like I said, and these real estate agents. And it was really fun because that's the end of the project for them. And so it's exciting, and it's exciting for everyone. But yeah, I loved every single day was different. We would go to the warehouse and we would pull all the inventory. There was also inventory online. So we would reserve all of the big pieces, but staying very organized with all of that was a big part of it. And then, of course, there's problem solving like with any job, but things don't show up on site, all of that. And then, of course, getting everything organized and laid out as you get there and unpacked, and then figuring out where everything's going to go and refining it throughout the days and everything. And, I also just got in there and they had moving crews, but like you had to get things done fast. So we would move things around ourselves and all of that. So I think just being scrappy and, adaptable, like I said, was a big learning part of that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds very similar to many of the shoots that I have done over the years. And like you say, I think that there is so much of it that, people just think, oh, it's, just styling and, it's like, and that obviously you do that. But so much of it as well is, like you say, being organized, managing the inventory that you're dealing with, and, having to get creative when things don't turn up and making the most of what you've got. So I think that has really held me in good stead in terms of, I think when you can do something like that, you can almost do anything, because afterwards it's just, you really are pushed to your limits in terms of, having to get creative, having to get resourceful, having to be organized on so many different levels. So I just thought, yeah, it would be interesting to get a little bit of your perspective of that. And so, like you say, then you transitioned more to doing interior design work. So did you then train? And I know that as part of your work with landscape design, which we'll kind of get into, but is that when you then trained to learn different programs at UCLA, or were you learning that independently or just self-taught? How did you then start to bring those skills towards interior design, and how did you upskill?
So I never did any formal school education as far as interior design. The woman that I started working with doing the staging, we also did some interior design projects as well. Primarily, we were doing staging, but I did get exposure to how she ran the back end of her interior design business as well. And of course, there were only three of us, so like I was very in the weeds with all of that and got to see how she ran her business and stuff. So I learned that way about interior design, and that's how I started, um, you know, with my own business. It was only landscape design that I started taking courses at UCLA for, and it actually wasn't even the technical skills. I've actually always outsourced that, and to this day, I have a woman that I work with who's a contractor, but she's a very integral part of what I do, and she does like technical drawings and renderings and all of that. So I was more honing in on my skills with landscape design as far as just my knowledge on plants and on designing like from a more high level. So
Yeah. Okay, great. And so what do you think it was for you that really pulled you to want to do landscape design? So like you say, you have been working with some clients in interior design, and you obviously felt this pull to focus more on landscape design. What do you think that was within you? What was really appealing about pivoting in that way?
I think just when I really dig down, being outside for me and nature has always been like my refuge, and especially in such a fast-paced world and often overstimulating world and stuff. I just think coming back to nature and having that place, that like sanctuary that feels very grounding to you, is a hugely important thing for me, and a gift that I want to give to all of my clients. But I did still love the design aspect of what I was doing, and I love the client facing aspect of what I was doing, and being with people and understanding their lifestyle and their family and what their needs are, and then translating that into a beautiful design that works for them. So that's always been a thread that has run through. But I think, like I said, I just really feel passionate about the environment and how healing nature can be for us. And I wanted to intersect the two and really just focus on that. And, rather than trying to do both things at once and not having as much of a focus on one or the other, I decided I'm really going to dive into landscape design and that be my focus.
And so, how did you then get your first client in landscape design? I know that you said you had some that you were doing a little bit of both, but one that you were primarily then working with landscape design. So, I know that this is often something that a lot of people, getting that first client can often be the biggest challenge.
Yeah, through contractors, I think, having worked with some contractors before on projects, or I actually did a landscape design project for my mom at my childhood home. And so I made some connections doing that in the community. And, since then that has rolled into other design projects with the contractors. But yeah, that has been a big theme, is I think like, the trades that you work with, those are big connections with getting the next lead.
Yeah, completely. And because you work so closely with them, they see how you work, they see your level of detail, how you show up. And because they want to be on good terms with their clients. So if they can recommend somebody who they think, wow, this is somebody who's really great to work with, then it sort of puts them in a positive light as well. So share a little bit about your process when it comes to doing landscape design, because I think that there's still a lot of people that don't necessarily know or understand what is involved in it, what is the value that you bring as a designer to somebody's spaces. So can you share a little bit about the process?
Yeah, so the design phase for me is separate from the construction phase. And I think that's a big thing to emphasize. There's two parts to it. I mean, just like interior design and the two scopes are coupled together, but I do the design and then I can or cannot be involved in the project oversight and installation and implementation. Almost always I am, but yeah, I mean, I start out. So for the design portion, I always start out with a discovery call with a potential client and a project questionnaire and get a sense of the scope of the project and them and, their goals and everything to determine for all of us if it's a good fit. And if it does seem like a good fit, I do a site walk and that's complimentary. That's part of my onboarding process. And I find that's helpful again for everyone to meet in person. And so I can see the site and understand better like what we're working with. And yeah, so I do a site walk. If we're aligned there, then I do a proposal for the client. And if we move forward with the proposal, I will either obtain a site survey from them if they already have one, or we'll get a site survey done depending on, whatever needs to be done. We don't always need to get a full site survey. Sometimes we just need to get some more basic measurements and it all depends on the project. But once we have all that information that we need, I start with a concept design. And so that's like a high level sort of just like the planting themes, the color palette, like maybe more of like a material palette, and just starting at a high level to ensure that we're aligned there before I go deep into the design drawings and, sourcing materials and all of that, just so to make sure that we're aligned every step of the way. So start with the concept design. Once that's approved, then I move into the actual design drawings. And so that includes a 2D planting plan, hardscape and lighting plan. And that's mostly to hand over to the contractor to implement. And then I do renderings, and that's very visual, and that helps the client interpret like what I'm trying to convey. And I do furniture selections and the hardscape selections and lighting and all of that. So it's an all-encompassing design package and presentation. And I will do a few rounds of revisions with them as part of the initial fee for that design. And so they get a whole package that they can understand the design intent. They have everything that they need to hand it over to the builder, and they can give an accurate bid, and then the process moves on. And so then if they want me still to be involved in the project, which again, oftentimes I am, We move into procurement. I actually don't usually buy the plants or hardscape materials. Usually that's the contractor that handles that part, but I will buy like furnishings and things like that. So we move into procurement, and then it's project oversight, and the projects can take however long they take. And that's really usually up to the builder to determine with the client. But I help oversee that specifically at the end, mostly with like the placement of the plants, because sometimes things have to be changed on site. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much the process. But the value is, the clear communication. You know what you're going to get. Your builder knows what they're going to get. So there's no surprises later on as far as the price, as far as, anything. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the things that I've suddenly experienced when I've gone to, I've been to so many homes over the years, and particularly when I was working for magazines and somebody had just finished the renovation and the magazine was really keen to like, let's get in there, they've just finished, it's looking great, let's shoot the home now. And I would go to these renovations, and I feel like for so many, certainly within Australia, like one of two things that happened. One was that they had no money left over for, the exterior. And it's like, but this is the first thing that you see. This is the thing that when you step home, you come into your driveway or you come to the street, level, that kind of street appeal factor. And it always feels like such a missed opportunity to not have allowance for that in your budget. Or secondly, people do have plans, but they don't. I always think you should do it almost in reverse, like, because people will, obviously when you're renovating, people are going to be going in and out of your home and so on. So I understand that people think, well, I'll do the garden afterwards because, then there's no contractors coming back and forwards. But someone that I work with a lot, a photographer, he did his garden first before he renovated, which I think is the best idea, because what happens is that when your home is finished, you've actually got this beautiful established garden, rather than having like these tiny little plants out the front and having to wait then, a year, 2 years for that garden to come to fruition and actually look like a thriving, healthy garden. And particularly if you are thinking that you might sell it down the track, you don't want to be selling a house that looks like, oh, it's got these, plants that are like 5 centimeters or a couple of inches high, you want to kind of see this like lush, beautiful garden. So I think it really is a bit of a missed opportunity in that sense that, when people leave it too late, or they think I'll do it afterwards, I think that there's actually so much benefit to actually doing it beforehand, so that, you actually get to have this complete home and garden. And it kind of looks so much more resolved as a space. So anyway, that's just my little take on landscape design. And something definitely to think. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always so impressed with you, because you are within my program Design and Grow, and how organized you are. And so yesterday we had a session whereby we were talking about onboarding clients, and did people have a process and a map, and you were sharing that you were one of the few people who said, yep, I've got a clear journey in relation to the onboarding of my clients, and which I always think, that's such a good sign of somebody who's, doing well in their business in terms of being organized, really understanding the client journey. And so many people who listen to this podcast do have creative businesses and so on. So can you sort of, I guess, pull back the curtains a little bit on what the back end of your business looks like in terms of the tools, the resources that you use on the back end to, elevate that client experience and for you to be organized within your business? So what systems and processes do you use in your business?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I try to stay organized, although I'm pretty basic with it, but it's efficient for me. And so like I have, I use Google Sheets. I have a Google Sheets document, and on each column I have every step in the full service landscape design process, everything from the discovery call to, the very end, and, the photo shoot information and stuff like that. But so, because I think a huge thing is over communicating with clients and making sure that they know what's going on every single step of the way, and like what's coming next and all of that. And so I created this process so that I don't miss anything. And so that I'm also not reinventing the wheel every single time. It saves me a ton of time to know exactly where I am with each project and like what comes next and, all of that. So, I mean, I have one sheet that has all of that, and I have like a checkbox next to like underneath each thing. So once the discovery call is done, and then I have like, an email that I send that follows up with that, or, here's the link to the questionnaire and all of that. So once those things are sent, I check it off and it's done. And so I have the whole process outlined, and I didn't just sit down and like do that all at once. I did each thing as I went through with the project. So it like didn't actually take me very much time to get organized. I just did it like naturally as it came. So that was for me the best way to do it. But then I also have another tab that just has each client. I have a document about them that like I make notes like just during our initial discovery call about them and what their goals are and stuff. So I can always reference back to that. Um, all the information about their project. And then I have like a to-do list and then like when we last touch base. So I keep track of, where we are, what there is to do, and all of that. So it's very like basic, but it's efficient for me to keep track of everything. I also keep track of all my time on Harvest. I use the app Harvest to do that. And I do my accounting and all of that stuff on QuickBooks. It's very, pretty straightforward, but it works for me. So
Oh, and what
yeah.
about when you're sending, where do you design your design concepts? Are you using, say, something such as Canva? How are you delivering those to clients? You've mentioned that you use a contractor for design work. How are you
Mhm.
delivering all of this? Is it via email, or what way are you delivering all the content to your clients?
Yeah, well, I do use Canva and I love Canva. And so I use Canva for all my design presentations and all of that. And then I have my contract link that I have like an electronic signature document through Panda Doc. And it's like, like any other e-signature app. So that's linked into my proposals and the contract and everything. And then I usually deliver everything by email unless it's like too big of a file. And then I do a Google Drive link. And I have folders for each project as well. Like I have a folder of current projects and then subfolders for like each piece of that project, the design drawings like version 1, version 2, all that, the contract, the, completed design service agreement and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah. And that just lives on my desktop, just with it, folders within one folder.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think people always love, I mean, I love hearing about, the different processes and apps and programs that people use, because I think there are so many different ways to do it. I don't think there's necessarily one right way to do it, but I think that, like you say, if you can be efficient, if you can be effective, if you can know where everything lives easily and you're not kind of rummaging around on your computer or your laptop and trying to find things, then that's always obviously, an important part of the process. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about how you structure like your typical days or your typical weeks. What does that look like for you in your business?
So I have learned from you, and I really wish that I was better about this. And I think this is a goal for next year. But in an ideal world, this is what I would do. This last year, I think I've been, very flex on this. But in an ideal world, on Mondays, I would start the morning by just doing like admin, um, planning for the week ahead, and working like within my business. And then in the afternoon, I would dedicate that time to design work. And then on Tuesdays, similar, but spending the morning doing more like outreach, and then the afternoon doing the design work and being more in the weeds of that. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays, I had dedicated to doing my discovery calls, doing client presentations, doing project oversight meetings or site walks. And then Fridays, I am good about this. Fridays, I do all my accounting for the week. I do a check in with each of my clients and just a progress, like status update where we are on everything. And then I oftentimes do project oversight meetings on Fridays as well. So I wish I was better about that and actually sticking to like that every day. But of course, you have to be flexible. But I think I've probably been a little too flexible with that. So
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, awareness is always the first step to improvement. So, so I'm sure that you will be on your way in 2025 and beyond. So, what about now? We have been speaking quite a little bit within Design and Grow about a new service and offering that you are putting out. Can you share a little bit about that? I think it'd be interesting for people to maybe hear about it just for their own homes. We have many people who do listen who are based in California, but also I think it's just a really interesting business idea for those people who, are more creative business owners around the world.
Yes, so we have just launched native plant packages, and what they include are it comes in two sizes. So either a small, which is 40 plants, or large, which is 120 plants. They're all native plants. They're beautifully curated for Southern California, specifically in zones 8 to 10, which is most of this area. And these packages include all the plants delivered to your door within a week. It includes a layout plan that is a guide for how you could place the plants for like a standard, front yard. And of course, that's customizable because everyone's site is different. But aside from the plans, it includes renderings so you can visualize the possibilities in your space. And it includes a step by step installation guide for the plants and a maintenance guide to ensure that their ongoing success. So it's really everything that you need to transform your landscape for a fraction of the cost of hiring a full service designer. And I wanted to create this offering to be more inclusive of people who aren't necessarily embarking on a huge landscape design project that, is going to take months and completely redo their whole entire home. Like some people just either want to do it themselves or just have an easy plan to hand over to their gardener and, just want to refresh their yard. So I wanted to create that offering to include the people who fall into that category as well. And so I'm really excited. I just launched it a few days ago.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm so excited for people to take a look at that. And we'll include links in the show notes to that as well for anyone who's interested. So I like to go through a series of questions that I ask every guest. So I'm going to ask you, Shannon, hope that you're ready. So
Yes.
which 5 words best describe you?
Okay. I would say positive. I would say genuine, consistent, strong willed, and adventurous.
What's one of the best lessons that you've learned on your journey so far?
I think, like I said earlier, I think I touched on this, but over communicate with clients. I think that's a big one. And also don't be afraid to ask questions to subs and builders and other designers and, people who've been doing it longer than you. And yeah, just stay curious.
What's one of your proudest achievements so far?
Well, there's so many, but I think first and foremost, just the relationships that I have built with my clients and with contractors and, the teams of people that I work with. I think that's the number one thing. But a few other things that I'm proud of is this, like my first podcast. Earlier this year, I did my first giveaway and collaborated with some brands. So that was really cool. There's been so many things. I think so many times that, I've been nervous or scared to do something. It feels really big, but just showing up anyway. So lots of little things like that I'm proud of myself for.
What's been one of your best decisions?
For sure. I think just going off on my own and chasing this dream and yeah, not looking back and just continuing to learn and do this.
Who inspires you?
I think it sounds probably so cheesy, but just my friends and family, first and foremost, that surround me that, are doing completely different things than I'm doing, but are out there like pursuing them. So, so fiercely. And, I'm really inspired by my close knit circle of people. And then as far as landscape designers go, there are so many that inspire me, but I really love Terremoto Landscape. I love Ibiza Exteriors. I love following their work. I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Topophyla. I love their work. There's so many people that inspire me, but yeah.
What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about wellness. I'm passionate about sustainability, although I am nowhere near, living like a perfectly sustainable life or anything like that. But um, I'm passionate about spending time outdoors and having that connection to nature.
I'm going to ask you as well, which I haven't yet done. I feel like I should ask you, it would be remiss to not ask you to share some tips for people for what's some of the big considerations for them to think about their garden. So we'll circle back to that in a moment. What dream do you still want to fulfill?
I would love one day to create like a wellness retreat sort of space that has um, really like immersive gardens and harvestable food and green roofs and breath work and yoga and meditation and all of that, like a space that you can come and recharge at. That's always been a dream of mine. I would love to create a space like that to for people to come and enjoy.
Amazing. And people have to check out your Instagram. We'll share the links with that because you've got such a beautiful aesthetic. So I'm in. Let me know
Okay,
when you've recreated it. Let me know. We'll do our next Design and Grow workshop there.
Yes.
What are you reading? What's on either your coffee table? What's on your nightstand? What books are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading the Fourth Wing series right now on my Kindle. And yeah, it's like a genre that it's like dragons and fantasy, and I've never been into books like that before, and I am changed. So,
It's good, isn't it? Sometimes to connect with those sort of books that you're like, oh, this is just such an escape and I can't put it down. And yeah, it can be fun. And what are you listening to? Do you listen to podcasts? If so, what sort, or music? What do you like to listen to?
as far as music, I listen to everything. Right now, they just did the Spotify Wrapped that they do, and I always like have such a wide variety of artists that I listen to. So I listen to all kinds of music, and sometimes just put my music on shuffle and listen to all kinds of stuff. And then as far as podcasts, I just listen to silly things that are just light and fun to listen to. But when I want to listen to something a little bit more serious, my husband has gotten me into the All In podcast. I listen to that, and I listen to the Wall Street Journal podcast. If I want to get up to date on the news and things like that.
Okay, I haven't heard of the All In one, so I'll have to check that out. I'm always looking for new recommendations. And finally, from these questions, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think, you're going to be scared a lot of times, but just keep showing up anyways. And also, no one's ever going to be you, and that's your superpower.
Love that. Love that. Okay, so let's just circle back for 1 second before we wrap up. And when it comes to, so for those people who are listening who've got a garden, which can be interior designers or it can be anyone, what are some of the big either tips that you would give to people to really, transform their garden, perhaps in an easy way, or some of the kind of the big mistakes that you see people making with their gardens when it comes to the look and feel of them?
Yeah, I think don't fight against like what works in your area. I would research what native plants are appropriate. I would start there because native plants have such benefit in with biodiversity, with strengthening the ecosystem, with creating, food and shelter for wildlife and bringing pollinators and all of that. So I would start with native plants and research what works in your area. Figure out what kind of soil you have, figure out, how much light that area in your yard gets. Like don't fight against nature, work with what you have. And so I think, yeah, just get a good understanding of what you're working with first and then figure out what plants are going to work.
I think there's always so many analogies between gardens and life and business. And when you were saying that, like, don't fight against nature, I think that within ourselves, when it comes to what we want to do in our lives, like you said, when I asked you what piece of advice would you give to your younger self, you're talking about like embracing what your superpower is, which is kind of that idea of like, don't go against who you are, like embrace who you are. And it's the same with our gardens. So I think there's so many great analogies there with business and life and creating a thriving garden. Before you go, I would also love it if you could share, because you have been within Design and Grow for a period of time now. What have been some of the benefits for you for being in the program? How has it helped you with your business? I'd love for you to share.
Definitely just having the accountability and having the community that surrounds it. I love, we do accountability pods, and I'm part of a group of some really incredible women doing different things, but just to have each other to cheer on and to share where we are and share challenges and get advice. That community aspect has been really incredible because, as someone who works on a small team or, just by myself a lot of the time or with the one woman that I work with, it's nice to have other people to bounce ideas around. So that community aspect has been awesome. And then, I also love how you've broken it down into different themes for each quarter, and that's made it really focused, I think. And yeah, there's been so many incredible takeaways from Design and Grow. So I've really enjoyed it.
Amazing. Thank you. And can you please share before we leave today, how people can connect with you on, is social media the best place for people to connect with you? If you can share a little bit about your business and the best way for people, if they are interested in the plant package, how they can find out more about that.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at SOWHome, SOW.home. And then my website, you can find everything else about my company and about the native plant packages and full service landscape design. And that's at SOWHome, SOW-home.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today on Imprint. It's been so great to learn more about your journey and your experiences and tips and advice. So it's always great, I think, to get an insider look at someone's business and see how they are, really growing and thriving. So thank you so much for sharing today.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. It's been such an honor. This has been great.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.